Hello guys, and welcome to Shadows of Prehistory channel. If you use these to fall asleep, that's the point. So before we begin, tap subscribe, leave a like if you want more, and tell me where you are and what time it is. Okay, lights down, headphones on. You wake to the taste of dust. It's in your mouth and in the shallow lines of your palms, packed under the cracked skin the way ash packs a fire pit. The wind has blown all night, a thin, sand-dry hiss that steals words the second they leave a tongue. Somewhere in the dark behind you, a child coughed until they slept themselves empty. Somewhere to the east, the old waterhole has become a mirror with nothing to reflect. There are 9 of you in this band. 9 people and a handful of ember, tucked into the belly of a split log like bright seeds. You carry that ember like a secret, because nights are colder now than anyone remembers, and mornings arrive with a kind of bruised light that makes the world look very far away. When dawn finally pulls itself over the horizon, you see the same thing you've seen for weeks. Low scrub, ribs of stone, the long backs of hills where wind can run without resting. Vultures find the sky first. They always do. No one says it out loud, because words feel like a luxury, but you are running out of places that will let you be human. The old ones don't count days the way you will, hundreds of thousands of years later, with numbers that stack neatly. They count signs. The grasses that used to comb your calves have withdrawn into the earth like a fist closing. The acacia pods are empty earlier each season. The slow river is a belt of cracked clay spotted with stranded fish bones as moon-white as your own teeth. The antelope you used to shadow across open ground have moved north, following a line of green that flickers and winks like heat itself. Even the hyenas have grown lean and quiet, and that feels wrong in your bones. When a species narrows, it doesn't happen like a door slamming. It's a long, lonesome tightening, the way a belt notch by notch can turn breath into work. Somewhere beyond the hills are other bands, other fires carried in other logs, and the sum of all of you is smaller than it has any right to be. Maybe 1,000 warm bodies on an entire planet that does not know your name. You don't know that number. You only know how often you startle at shadows now, and how sound travels farther in the dry air, and how sleep feels thin as a bird's wing. You walk. You walk because movement is the only argument you have left with the sun. You walk in a single-file silence, each foot sliding into the scuffed print of the person ahead to save your skins from the tiny knives of dry grass. At your back, the wind stacks the sand back into your footprints, erasing you as you go. In your mind is a map with more gaps than landmarks, a stand of thorn that once held weaver nests, a ridge where basalt breaks like dark glass, a place where the ground remembers water under the heel. In the first heat of day, you find a tree that still believes in shade. The baby sleeps, finally, head heavy on her mother's shoulder, mouth open in a perfect O. The old man whose knees click like napped flint hums back of throat to keep himself from stiffening. The rest of you sit with your backs to the trunk and chew roots that taste like the earth looks. The ember in the log glows through a crack, small as an eye peeking. You feed it a twist of grass. It answers. Drought is not just a lack of water. It is a thief of choices. It takes the lazy path first, shallow pools, surface food, and then it goes deeper, stealing time. Stealing the margins where mistakes can live without killing you. By the 4th day without a real drink, you begin to move like you are wearing someone else's body. By the 7th, you begin to think about how quiet it would be not to move at all. But something stubborn lives in you, older than language, older than the idea of tomorrow. Maybe it is the way the child's fingers curl around your thumb while she sleeps. Maybe it is the old man's humming, the way it vibrates your shoulder through the bark. Maybe it is the ember, that ridiculous little sun your hands can carry. Whatever it is, when the light thins and the world cools, you stand again. You angle toward the place the big birds circle at midday and refuse at night. You angle toward a rumor, green you thought you saw when the wind changed, a smell that wasn't dust. You know enough to move at dusk, when the predators are busy with their own decisions and the air lifts off your skin like a complaint finally answered. Your eyes learn what the dark is willing to give. Your feet learn to trust the map of your toes. On the 2nd night, the hyenas find you. You never see them. You hear them, though, their curious, bone-bellied laughter carried clean on the wind. They are not starving enough to be brave tonight. Good. There are limits to what you can argue with. On the third night, a line appears where the sky should meet the ground. For a while you think it is another trick of distance, a mirage hung low. But it persists, darker than the air, a patient smudge that refuses to be wind. As the hours slide, the smudge becomes a lip of land. Behind that lip there is either nothing or everything. The old man starts humming again. Your band makes camp among collapsed stones that smell faintly of wetness that isn't there. You circle the ember into a shallow bowl scratched out with a stick and feed it to life. The first flames lift like shy hands. Everyone moves closer, shoulders rounded, chests sighing without permission. You roast a strip of something stringy and pass it hand to hand. The baby wakes, blinks at the firelight as if the world has invented a new color, and laughs once, surprised by her own mouth. All of you laugh back, too quickly, because you need to believe your mouths can still make that shape. In the shaky light, the old woman with the split ear tells a story with her hands. She draws a river you cannot see and a hill you think you have climbed. She draws a circle for a mouth and taps her throat for thirst, and then she draws a line that widens, green widening, water widening, until her fingers can't stretch far enough. She stops and looks at each of you in turn to make sure you are willing to believe her. You nod, all of you, because you have to. You sleep in pieces. You dream flat dreams, water that does not flee when you touch it, a sky that smells like rain, a body that isn't all angles. Morning comes copper. You climb. The lip of land is not kind. It is a broken stair of rock that insists you measure every step. 3 times you pause to let the child's mother breathe. Twice you stop because the old man's humming becomes a whistle through his teeth, and you don't like the way it sounds. Once you stop because a snake has braided itself across the exact place your foot needs to be, and the world is not in the mood to negotiate. Eventually the rock relents, and the last of the wind pushes at your back, as if it too wants to know what's over the edge. You crest the ridge, and your legs forget to move, because your eyes have to be greedy first. Below you, the land folds into a long, slung bowl, and inside that bowl is a green you haven't seen in a season. Not the dusty green of stubborn shrubs, but the wet, apologetic green of plants that have no idea how rare they are. Grass lies down in waves. Wild grain nods, heavy enough to pull its own heads. There are trees with real shade, and along the far curve of the bowl, silver like a torn piece of animal skin, a ribbon of water moves. It takes a long time to remember your legs. Later, you'll tell yourselves you went slow because caution is a kind of wisdom. The truth is you don't trust your eyes and you are afraid to move in case the bowl is the kind of thing the world might snatch back if you rush it. But the world doesn't snatch. The bowl remains. The water remains. When you kneel and put your hands into it, it climbs your skin of its own accord as if it has been practicing for this moment. You drink until your belly asks you to stop, and then you drink a little more. You press wet palms to temples and neck. You dunk the ember log fast and pull it back faster, heart kicking, and laugh at yourself because you'll have other wood here and other fires, and the idea of losing this one feels less like the end of everything. You sleep in shade for the first time in a long time and wake to a kind of quiet that has birds in it. Down by the water, herons hunt with a patience you admire. Tracks cross and recross the bank. Antelope, small cats, something heavy that came at night and had the courtesy to leave you alone. It is not paradise. It is not for you alone. But it is enough to let your bones remember what it is to be something besides a mouth and feet. The valley does not fix anything. It offers ingredients. Water that doesn't run away. Reeds that split into rope. Stones that flake the way your hands want them to. Roots with the sweet bite of starch if you roast them past black. A hillside where the wind is tired and will let the smoke from your fire rise in a straight line. It offers the idea that you might be able to stay long enough to do more than survive this week. You set to work like you're thanking someone. The old man shows the boy how to chip a stone so that the sharpness lives along the right edge instead of skittering off wild. The split-eared woman shows the mother how to weave reeds into a mat that keeps babies off damp ground and bothers some insects enough to send them elsewhere. You find a tree with a heart of wood that will hold ember without trying to eat it whole. You all learn the language this place speaks, where the clay is good to seal a bowl, where the bank is false and will give under a careless foot, where the best fish collect under a lace of roots at dusk like shadows with weight. At night, everyone makes a circle as if the shape itself is a tool. The child stands with both hands in the air and counts the stars in her own way. 1, 1, 1, as if each is a new discovery. You watch her and allow yourself something that isn't quite a smile, because smiling feels like a promise, and you have learned not to make those lightly. When you sleep, your dreams remember details: the exact cool of water around ankle bone, the taste of roasted tuber, a little bitter at the edges, the light weight of ash on your skin in the morning. Days stack. You begin to mark time not by thirst, but by tasks. Morning. Check the snare line along the gully where the grain falls. Midday. Gather reeds before the sun leans hard. Late. Carry coals to the new fire, because a second hearth means a second chance. Your body changes in small, approving ways. Your steps remember the difference between walking to outrun a horizon and walking to make a place. There are signs that the bowl belongs to others, too. Scat that isn't yours. Tracks like punctuation marks. Once, a distant call that makes your shoulder blades try to climb your back. You don't pretend the valley is a secret. You pretend it is a shared rule. Everything alive gets a turn. On a morning with air cool enough to be generous, you find the old man standing by the water, looking at his reflection like he's waiting for it to answer. He doesn't hum. He just stands there until the sun moves one stick width along the ground and says nothing to you when he finally turns. That night, he tells a story with his hands that you haven't seen before. It's about leaving. Leaving is a dangerous word here. It feels like inviting the wind back into your mouth. But as he draws, you see that leaving isn't the point. It's a direction. He shapes the line of the river with his palms. He curves it outward and up valley where the grass thins and the ground rises, and the hills beyond look less like a wall than like a row of sleeping animals. His hands say what his mouth doesn't. This place feeds you. It can also teach you where to go next. Water leads to water. Green leads to green. Paths are not lines on the ground. They are decisions repeated. You lie awake after the fire goes to red. You listen to the night insects counting themselves. Somewhere along the far bank, something heavy lowers itself into the water and sighs as if it has been carrying more than a body. The baby murmurs like a bird in a dream and rolls against her mother's belly. You press your palm to the packed earth and feel the little tremors of life passing underneath, the small footsteps of things that don't care about your plans. You are not safe. You are not saved. But you are not falling anymore. In the morning, you carry the ember log the way you always do. Habit is its own kind of courage. You leave a ring of ash around last night's hearth that will tell anyone who comes after that the circle held. You follow the old man's hands upstream, past the second stand of reeds and the place where the bank collapses in a checker of dry squares. You stop at each bend of the river and look for what it is trying to say. When you find a narrow place where the water runs over stones with a voice like talking, you learn the stones by feel and step across, passing the log one person to the next, the baby first, then the old man, then the woman with the split ear, each of you the bridge for someone else. Upstream, the land repeats itself with variations, like a song that likes its chorus. Small bowls nested inside larger ones. Patches of shade that look like old friends. Every time the water turns, you wonder if this is where your luck thins, and every time it doesn't, you feel the quiet click of a plan that isn't yours but includes you anyway. That is how the line doesn't end, by inches, by ember, by people who keep walking until the world gives them something to hold, and then walking again while they're holding it. You don't know that your number is woven into a number called a bottleneck, that your children's children will carry the echo of this valley in their blood, that one day someone will say, "There were maybe 1,000 of us," and mean it literally. What you know is simpler and heavier. Water on your skin, a circle of faces in firelight, a line of green that does not run away when the wind rises. You go on. You learn a place the way a hand learns a tool, by touch first, then by memory, and only later by names. The valley teaches slowly, and then all at once. You start with the obvious: water at the river's lip, roots under the willow-like trees, fat grubs where the old trunks soften to sponge. But staying means learning what doesn't shout. The wind carries tiny messages through the reeds. It says where mosquitoes hatch, and where smoke will drift instead of choking you back into coughs. Clay hides under the bank, the good kind that seals smoke pits and mends cracked bowls if you work it long enough to make it agree with your fingers. Stones aren't just hard or not hard. Some split with a clean opinion, some fuzz at the edge and waste your time. You keep those lessons inside your wrists. Shelter is a conversation with everything that wants to take your heat. You weave reed mats until your knuckles ache and prop them on lengths of sapling bent into ribs. The split-eared woman shows you the trick of lacing a ridge line with twisted bark so the roof asks rain to run instead of sit. The old man smears clay along the bottom seam like he is drawing a horizon. You press your palms into it and leave shallow moons that look like decoration but are really just the marks of work. The hut smells like wet earth and smoke and your own breath. At night, the reed walls speak in tiny clicks and whispers as they settle, and you feel safer because even your shelter is telling you where it is. You make rules without speeches. No one names them because names make things brittle. They become the way you move. Fire is fed before mouths. Coals are spread thin at dusk, so the morning catch has somewhere to live. Meat is cut across the muscle so it cooks fast and doesn't steal the fire for hours. The ember log never sits flat. A stone props it so air can interview the coals and keep them awake. You learn the balance between guarding and letting go. Too much air makes ash. Too little makes sleep you can't wake up from. Food stops being just luck and becomes work with a rhythm. Wild grains at the valley's shoulder thicken from green to gold. You crush heads into your palms, and the kernels leap free like small hard fish. A flat stone becomes a quiet thunder when you grind them. Flour collects in a shallow bowl. The color of dust, the smell of something more than dust. You mix it with water and smear it on a hot rock. The first time, it blackens and tastes like the fire looks. By the fifth time, it blisters just right, and the child laughs with her mouth full as if bread is a joke the earth told for you. Tubers that used to bite your tongue turn kind after a long boil. Bitterness loses slowly. You begin to count, not with numbers any of your children will remember, but with marks that stand in for breath. A stick at the doorway, nicked once for each night your fire lived. A bracelet of seeds threaded on grass. One for each person who returned from the snare line. Counting is not control. You know the world too well for that. Counting is gratitude you can touch. The valley closes a hand around you, but you don't clench. The old man's leaving story has a tail, and you follow it in pieces. In the cool hours, two of you walk upstream with baskets and return with news as valuable as roots. A stand of trees heavy with pods that break into sweet meat if you let them tire in the sun. A bend in the river where fish collect behind a rock like gossip. You scrape a low trail into the grass by walking it enough times. Paths are just the earth remembering your feet. On one of those walks, you find the remains of someone else's fire. Ash in a shallow bowl, char the exact size of your thumb. Your chest tightens and then loosens. The feeling is not fear. It's clarity. You are not a secret. Good. Secrets break. Visitors appear like weather. They watch first, faces low above the grass. Then they show themselves with empty hands, which is the right way to arrive. Their fire kit is a bundle of something that looks like bark and sparks like a wasp when they tease it with a stone. Their words are different, but their gestures are the same. We came, we are, we want to leave better than we arrived. You answer with food because food is the first sentence anyone understands. Their child stares at your child the way puppies do, serious and delighted at the same time. What begins as caution becomes practice. When the strangers leave, your band ties two reed mats with a loop of twisted fiber and presses a shell into the knot. A gift and a sign. The shell is nothing here. No sea to explain it. But the stranger's eyes widen with the pleasure of being seen, and they hang it at the throat of a youth whose grin needs something to do. The next time a different group arrives, they carry a bone needle with a hole so clean it looks like water made it. Exchanges like that repeat until the valley is strung with thin threads you could never map, but can feel if you stand still. Paths of attention, favors that will be returned, names that are really descriptions. Long leg, deep laugh, soft hands, attached to faces that will one day help carry your sick. This is how knowledge stops dying with the person who learned it. Someone miles away shows someone else the trick of using a rotten log to keep coals alive under rain. Someone else shows how to sleep on a mat of green leaves above damp ground and wake without coughing. Someone finally finds the exact stone that loves to be a knife and tells a sister band where it sleeps. Culture is just memory with legs. The child grows faster than your patience and slower than your love. She learns the path to the water with her eyes closed because you teach her to walk it that way, feet reading the ground, hands out only enough to taste the air. She knows not to step where the bank gives, not because you frighten her, but because you show her the way mud looks when it has bad ideas. You give her a branch with old ember asleep inside, and walk with her as she carries it to the new hearth, as solemn as a priest and as proud as a thief. She sleeps with ash on her cheeks most nights. Ash is the first paint children wear. There are other, quieter rules that you make because staying alive with so few people requires a kind of mathematics you can feel if you can't name. People who grew up next to each other don't make children together. That's not a law. It's something the body hints at by making you uneasy if you try. So you let the path do the choosing. Mates from away, from the reed mats and shell loops and bone needle people. Visits become longer. A youth stays for a season, learns the shape of your hills, leaves with a mat and a new story braided behind his ear. Your group doesn't grow all at once. It grows like a net, wider, not just thicker. You don't know the word for it, but you live the shape of drift. In a world with only a few of you, chance is a big animal, and you must feed it carefully. Some days you lose someone strong to a stupid fall, and for a while every knife edge looks thin on purpose. Other days you gain a trick nobody planned, a way of binding a split walking stick so it holds until the wood forgets it was broken, and that becomes the difference between carrying a child and not. Luck shapes you, but habit holds you in place long enough for luck to find you again. Night remains your best classroom. Firelight is a gentle teacher. It hides distractions and shows hands. You watch the old man shape a point by turning the stone and not the wrist, the way it saves skin and keeps edges honest. You watch the split-eared woman coil a rope from fibers you used to throw away as useless fluff. Words are there, but they are shallow boats. What carries the lesson is rhythm, the counting under your breath, the way a task has a song if you listen for it. Around the circle, you learn the stories that fasten choices to memory. A story about a band that ate the wrong tuber without boiling it long enough becomes the reason you count to the length of a song and a half before you pull anything from the pot. A story about a man who fished alone and did not return becomes the reason no one meets the river by themselves when the moon is thin. Stories are not laws. They are more durable. In the mornings, your body knows its list without being told. Move the coals, check the traps where the grass leans, shake the mats to tell the scorpions that hospitality has limits, grind, mend, laugh. The laughs are small, fast things, like birds. They come when a pot cracks but the meal is still good, when a fish slips the net but jumps toward your hands anyway, when the child leans too close to the fire and singes the hair at her brow and looks at you, shocked, as if flame has committed a personal betrayal. You touch her forehead, say the sound that means, now you know, and she makes the face that means, I knew already. And both of you are right. The season leans. Rains arrive in a logic you can feel, but not predict, not yet. The river rises until it forgets which path is its own. It tests the roots of your shelters and asks your knots if they are honest. You move your hearths up the bank and wait. When the water falls back, it leaves behind silt rich as a promise. You press seeds into it, the ones you collected without quite admitting you were collecting, and find that the earth is willing to remember your intentions. It is not farming yet. It is the thought before farming. Larger animals test the valley with you. Hoofprints deepen at the far edge of the bowl. One evening, a line of heavy shapes moves along the ridge, their backs slow as clouds. You keep the fire big that night and burn green leaves to make a smoke that carries your scent farther than your courage does. Nothing happens, which is to say, everything continues. Continuance is the rarest thing. News travels the way scent does after rain, farther than you expect, sooner than seems likely. Bands who never met the shell loop people or the bone needle people arrive with the gifts those people invented, as if objects had grown legs. You hear secondhand about a gorge where stone comes out thin as a tongue and takes an edge like it enjoys the work. You hear about a path that leads to a place where the ground bleeds salt, which makes meat last longer than it should. You can't go everywhere. You don't need to. You only need to be part of a map big enough that your absence would be noticed. Illness comes, because that is one of the ways the world keeps score. A cough that digs deep and doesn't respect firelight. You keep embers high and lullabies low. You put warm stones at feet and armpits. You trade for bitter leaves with visitors who mime the way their grandmothers chewed them. You chew, too, and your face puckers, and you swallow anyway. Some get better. One does not. You build a cairn at the place where the shade is kind and the wind does not gossip. You sit there with the old man and say nothing until silence has said what it needed. Grief is a ritual even when you didn't decide it should be. The child asks you, later, if the person is gone. You say a word that means both far and inside, which is as close as language ever gets. She accepts that because she is young and because firelight makes ideas seem more reasonable. When the dry returns, you do not panic. You move before panic has a chance to grow teeth. Trails you made with your feet have names now, even if they are just the name of a bend or a feeling. You send 2 to the gorge stone place with a mat and a story. They come back with edges hard enough to make you careless if you let them. You send 3 along the salt path with smoked meat and return with crystals that glitter like jokes and keep fish sweet for days. The valley is still your center, but your circle is bigger. Distance is less dangerous when you know where you can sit down and be recognized. All of this, mats, paths, gifts, rules you don't call rules, does something to your numbers that no one sees from inside the work. Babies carry flesh on their cheeks even at the end of the dry. Old people hum longer. Visits turn into seasons. Seasons become bonds. Bonds become a weave that can stretch without tearing when a river refuses to behave or when the grass learns a new trick. Somewhere, if someone could count in the way the future will count, you have become slightly more than you were. Not much. Enough. At dusk, the circle glows again. You pass a flat cake from hand to hand, and it steams in the cool like it is still thinking about the water it used to be. The child leans against your side and falls asleep the way children do, mid-chew. The old man's humming settles around the fire like another kind of light. Across the river, a night bird calls with a voice that makes the hair on your arms lift. You answer with a low whistle you were taught by someone whose name you didn't keep, but whose lesson you did. The bird falls quiet, then calls again, softer, as if correcting you gently. You look past the flames to the dark beyond, where the path will spill you into other bowls and other waters when it is time. Staying and going no longer feel like enemies. They are just different ways of describing the same work, keeping Ember alive long enough to hand it to the next pair of hands. You feel, not think, how what you are doing here, these small, repeatable mercies, fills the space between disasters until disaster has to work harder to find you. The valley breathes. You breathe with it. And far beyond the circle's edge, where your eyes won't go but your luck will, other circles answer. A low constellation of fires that don't know each other and still belong to the same idea. That is endurance. Not a single great act, but 1,000 small ones that refuse to forget each other. The ember becomes more than heat. It becomes a memory you can carry. You learn to coax fire from what looks like absence, a length of dry stalk with a stubborn, pithy heart, a stone that sheds bright pain when kissed by another, a twist of bark that holds a coal the way a closed fist holds a secret. You still keep the old ember. Superstition is just experience with scars, but you also practice beginning from scratch until your hands know the friction song without your head needing to listen. The first time a coal blossoms from dust and effort alone, the child claps like thunder in miniature, and the old man laughs the way men do when something heavy steps off their shoulders. Fire changes the shape of night, and night changes the shape of thought. When beasts keep their distance from the circle's edge, your minds move farther than your feet can. Stories lengthen. They grow spines to carry weight and ribs to hold breath. You talk about the river you haven't seen yet that the strangers described with their hands, the one that hisses like a mouthful of hot roots when it runs over flat stone. You talk about the line the wind drew on your skin 2 days walk upstream. Its smell of something green the valley does not have, and suddenly maps exist that are not scratched into dirt but stitched into attention. With fire comes cooking, and with cooking comes time you didn't own before. Meat softens in the pot. Roots give up their sting and turn honest. Grains accept water as fate and become food you can eat with your gums when teeth complain. You spend fewer hours chewing punishment into nutrition. Spare hours are a fortune, and you invest them in things that last. Stone edges, baskets that don't leak opinion, a sling that sends a stone farther than your arm ever could. It is a quiet revolution, so quiet you almost don't hear it. The quiet is the point. Visitors arrive in a thinner trickle now that the dry has thought better of itself. They bring news the way bees bring dust that turns into life. Far downslope, A band found a place where the ground crusts white and bitter at the edge of a shallow lake. They learned the trick of laying strips of meat in that bite, and the meat returned from the sun unspoiled days later, cured by a taste that is not pleasant but is powerful. Upriver, someone learned to knit a fence from thorn that persuades pigs to choose another argument. You trade stories about cats with spots that hunt by silence and cats with no spots that hunt by patience, and how both dislike the smell of smoke in their whiskers. Knowledge moves faster than bodies, lays the track ahead of your feet. In the cool, just before dawn, you wake to a feeling like a rope tugged gently. It is not danger. It is a direction. The valley is a bowl that feeds you, and it is a mouth that whispers go. Not because here is failing, but because here has taught you how to notice water even when it tries to hide. You understand that staying alive is not the same as staying put. You pack the way people do who respect both weight and wanting. Mats roll tight, tied with a double hitch the split-eared woman invented after a basket fell apart at the wrong moment and taught her a lesson with wet fish and shame. A pouch of flour sits beside smoked meat, beside a stone you'd be embarrassed to call lucky and would be foolish to leave. You take seeds because hope takes up almost no space and weighs almost nothing. You leave gifts on the hut posts, beads of baked clay that the child formed with tongue between teeth, wonky as baby steps. The valley will remember you even if it doesn't care. That is enough. Your feet relearn the grammar of distance. You step with knees soft, hips patient, eyes flicking as much for shade as for hazard. The old man's hump becomes a walking stick for the air. The child holds the edge of your mat with one hand and the ember log with the other and walks like someone balancing sky on her head. The path out is not the same as the path in. Nothing is. Upriver, the land rearranges itself into a necklace of bowls and narrows. You move from green to green like crossing stones. Where the river tightens, you read the foam to find shallow teeth and step between them. Where reeds thicken, you follow the geese that know where mud stops being lies. Sometimes you sleep in a scrape under roots while rain writes its fast handwriting on the leaves. Sometimes you sleep under stars so clean and close you feel ashamed to have brought smoke into their faces. On the fourth night, you see a distant glow, not the round, nervous eyes of predators, but the steady breath of another fire. You stop far enough to be polite and sing the note that means, "We are coming with empty hands." An answering note rises, a little off-key in a way that makes you like them before you see them. Their circle is shaped like yours. Their mats smell of a different river. They pass you a bowl with a stew that tastes like fish and something sour that brightens the mouth. In return, you pass your flatbread and the old man's laugh, which is salt in it too. The night becomes a market of ideas. They show you their fire drill, 2 sticks and a bearing shell, elbow anchored against a shin to make the motion merciful, and in your hands it becomes a true thing. You show them how to carry coals inside a nested bundle of dry fungus and bark that breathes like a sleeping animal and refuses rain like a stubborn elder. They ask where you learned it. You point behind you, then ahead, then to your chest, and they nod as if that answer is exactly right. They speak of a tree that oozes a sweet tear when cut, a bead you can lick off your finger and feel some fierce ache inside you calm. You speak of a way to cook a bitter root inside clay, buried under ash, until the bitterness leaves like a guest who knows when a visit has become impolite. They have a word for a path that is safer together, and you tuck it into your bag as if it were a tool. They have a young person with eyes like the river at noon who watches your child sleep and looks suddenly lighter, the way people do when they realize the future is already here and has small hands. You leave at first light with their word in your mouth and a new drill in your pouch. They leave with a coil of your rope and a promise that sounds like a joke and isn't. As you walk, you realize that this is migration without loneliness. Lines run between fires now, thin as cobweb and just as strong when multiplied beyond sense. When the land finally does something new, it does it all at once. The river breaks its own patience and spills across flat ground, braiding and re-braiding itself in silver threads. The grass here is a waist-high sea. Your band fans out accidentally because it feels good to be inside something that moves the same direction whether you command it or not. The child disappears from your side and reappears 10 steps away, triumphant, with both arms full of seed heads that fall apart at a touch. You make a tent of your shirts to carry them, and for a while you harvest by walking with your eyes open. Beyond the grass, sea is a line of low hills wearing dark stone like jewelry. The strangers were right. The stone flakes almost by thinking at it. You stay 3 days, long enough to arm everyone with edges that cut with the easy cruelty of water, long enough to leave a cairn to tell the next passers-by that the good seam is 2 handspans below the surface, under the rock shaped like a sleeping dog. You do not believe in owning. You believe in being remembered well. The leaving and staying rhythm sets into muscle memory. A bowl here for a season, a bin there for a week, a hard push across a ridge because the wind says don't sleep here, with the certainty of teeth. Along the way, your circle changes in ways that stories will later compress into a sentence. A youth from the Shell Loop people stays after trading and smells like river and dusk. Their hands know nets. Their laugh is a new instrument in the band, and the child learns it by ear. An elder's knees decide they are finished with distances, and you leave them under a roof you built high on a slope that floods only in stories. And you visit long enough to learn that the world does not end when a piece of your heart decides to stay where the view is kind. Somewhere between the stone jewelry hills and a valley whose river tastes faintly of metal, the child counts not one at the stars anymore, but one and another, which is as close as any human ever gets to mathematics before mathematics decides to name itself. You realize, dizzy and briefly afraid, that the map inside your people is changing shape. It is becoming a net that catches good fortune on purpose. Your numbers answer. Babies arrive and do not immediately leave. Joints last longer. Scars still come, but more of them are old, which is a kind of luck your ancestors did not have. If someone could bottle the feeling you have when you watch a young person show a stranger how to bind a cut with cobweb and ash, they would call it certainty. It is not certainty. It is a braid, habit around luck, around stubbornness, around love. There are still nights when the wind tastes like stone and absence, and your fire needs to be fed shadows as well as wood. There are still mornings when the traps are empty and you chew your bread careful and slow so your belly believes the lie you are telling it. But the bad days don't hunt alone anymore. They are trailed by good days that know your camp's smell and find you sooner than they used to. Later, by which you mean after enough circles of wet and dry that your hair has learned a new color. You sit by a river that isn't the first or the fifth you have learned to name with your feet. Children who don't remember the original valley run in and out of the shallows and invent rules for games as if they are also inventing law. A visitor from farther than any of your maps used to go shows you a fish trap made of stones that persuades the water to do the catching. You stare like a fool, then build your own, then pretend you always knew, because pride is also a tool. You think about how far your ember has traveled. You think about the Shell Loop people, the Bone Needle people, the Bearing Shell Drill, the Salt Lake, the Thorn Fence, the stone that loves edges, the word for safer together. You think about the elder humming into a different valley now, his tune still inside your hands when you turn a stone the right way. You think about how much of you is made from gifts you didn't know you were being given until you were already changed by them. When night leans in and the children quiet because the fire has asked them to, you look up. The sky is wide enough to hold every story you've heard and still want more. You realize that migration was never a line you drew across a map. It was an inheritance, passed from hand to hand with a coal that refuses to go out, a series of choices that let chance become kin. You don't know the names the future will give to what you've done, founder effects, drift, networks, but you know the feeling of watching a circle of faces in firelight and understanding that they are the answer to a question the earth has been asking for a very long time. You sleep with ash on your skin and the taste of salt on your tongue and a map in your ribs that hums softly, even in dreams. In the morning, you will lift the coal basket and the children will lift the baskets of seeds and stories, and the path will lift itself to your feet as if it has been waiting. The ember doesn't just remember where you've been. It remembers where you meant to go. And because you kept it alive long enough to hand it to someone smaller than you, it will keep going, even on days when you cannot. You begin to sense that what you're carrying isn't just ember or tools or the map under your feet. It's a way of answering the world, and the answer keeps surviving. Seasons stack until you can read them in your joints as well as in the grass. Faces in the circle change, the music stays. Bands split and braid and meet again with toddlers on their hips and new songs in their throats. The child who counted stars with one and another and another grows into someone who can tell weather by the taste of air and who can make a fire look easy in rain. She teaches a smaller hand to pinch flour into a circle and lay it on the warm rock. When it blisters right, both of them grin with the same mouth, separated by years and no distance at all. There are years that take. A sickness that moves like fog along the river, thin and everywhere at once. You build your fires high, you boil until bitterness leaves, you sleep in shifts so weary lungs can borrow warmth. You send runners to circles you've never sat in, and they return with leaves that numb a throat, with mush you smear on a chest that makes a cough loosen and walk out. Some go into the cairn shade, more than before, but not all, not most. After, when the air is clear and the river resumes its old voice, you count the people who are left the same way you once counted nights, and the number fits in your mouth without cutting. That is not small. That is victory. There are years that give, rains that arrive with patience, not violence, antelope that forget to be ghost and stand long enough to be gratitude, children who live long enough to collect scars on knees and stories about how they earned them, visitors who arrive with a red stone that, rubbed on a skin drum, leaves a streak the color of berries on tongues. A girl paints a spiral on her own forearm and dances until the fire copies her motion. Someone watching decides that this is what strength looks like in the body and tries to walk like that the next morning, shoulders wide to the work. You find that you make marks on purpose now. Ash on a cheek for a hunt, a ring of clay around a pot that says, "We are us," hands pressed into a post to remember who built here. Meaning learns how to sit on surfaces. You keep discovering that care pays interest. A person with a bad foot still throws straight. Their voice carries across a valley when danger needs a name. They remember where the cold wind gums together in the canyon and where the sun lingers on sandstone in winter. You set aside the best piece of meat for the elder with the soft teeth because they are a library. You protect the belly of a pregnant woman with your own ribs because you are greedy for tomorrow. When a baby will not stop crying, 3 women take turns walking the riverbank in the blue hour until the child dreams. These are not grand gestures, and they have saved more lives than any spear. Somewhere along a slope of black glassy stone, you teach a visitor how to turn a flake by listening to the click in their wrist. They watch your hands, and then their own, and then they look at you like gratitude is a weight they can set down only by paying forward. You know that look. It's lived on your own face. You leave them with a small basket of coal, a bundle of reeds, a word that means you can sleep at our fire without asking. And you watch them go the way you watch rain move across distance, not yours and still yours. You've walked far enough to know that the earth repeats itself with differences, like a song you can learn by humming. Bowls, rivers, ridges, sweet roots that need patience, bitter ones that need punishment, grasses that fall apart into food if you coax them with stone. In some bowls the night smells like salt, in some it smells like iron, in some it smells like wet fur, and you take the long way around. You leave more than footprints now. You leave helpful lies. A cairn that makes a false bank honest. A branch bent to point a thirsty traveler uphill where water stutters out of rock. You leave truths too. Marks that say we were here and well. Because the world deserves to know when it did right by you. On a night when the fire burns the lazy blue that means wood is green and still learning how to be flame. A young man asks you why you keep the old songs, the old rules. When your circle sits heavier and your stores hang fat and the river knows your name. You point at the baby asleep with her mouth open and at the ember basket breathing like a small animal and at the stars that look close enough to knock together, and you say, "Because the world isn't done testing us." He nods and looks a little embarrassed to have asked a question with such an obvious answer. Still, he needed to hear it in your voice. Tradition isn't a fence. It's a rope you throw to yourself from yesterday. The dry comes back harder than you were owed. The river pulls its skirt in tight and shows its muddy ankles. You had seeds tucked in clay and smoke tucked in meat and favors tucked in paths. And even so you feel the old hunger's hand on your shoulder, heavy and familiar. This time, though, you know where to stand so the wind will not steal your words. This time you know which bend still holds fish when everything lies. This time, when you move early, and you do not arrive late to the green. Difficulty still bites. It does not get a second bite. You give that to a child who is chewing slow to pretend she is full. She learns, without knowing she's learning that the first rule is the same as the last, hand to hand. You find yourself, sometimes, chasing a thought you cannot quite pull down. It flickers, the sense that you are small and large at once, that your circle is a dot in a sweep of land that doesn't end, and also the whole reason land matters, that your breath is a thread in a rope that crosses time. You sit with the elder by the cairn shade and say this with your clumsy mouth, and they smile like they have been waiting for you to arrive at this feeling. They press your hand to your chest, and you feel your own knock there, steady as a drum you didn't have to make. That's the rope, their eyes say. Hold on. Years turn so many times the old man's hum becomes other people's voices. You're the one who knows where to set a hearth, so smoke leaves like a well-mannered guest. You're the one who vetoes the path that looks easy and is a throat. You're the one who remembers the first valley's grass and the way it lay down like an animal wanting its back scratched. And you're the one who realizes that even if your feet never step there again, you are still standing in it every time you hand a coal to a small, insistent palm. One evening, a storm walks the horizon like a slow animal, and the sky breaks into pieces the size of your fear. Lightning writes its sudden alphabets, and thunder reads them out loud. Your circle tightens without anyone deciding it should. Children press into ribs and shoulders, and nobody complains. When the rain finally begins, it is straight and honest and cold enough to scold. You laugh under it because your roof does its work and because you have earned the right to be washed and not worried. When it stops, the smell is a new thing and an ancient one, and the world looks like it apologized. Later, when the ground is soft and gracious, you stand and look at the faces the fire keeps. You see lines at eyes from squinting into light and from laughing into dark. You see a scar that maps a mistake and a wrist that remembers a lesson. You see the curve of a belly with someone inside practicing how to be someone outside. You hear the river saying a word you will never split into pieces and put in your mouth, a word that means continue. Long after you lie down, this is what will be left, the habit of making circles and making space inside them. The greed for tomorrow that makes you share today. The tricks that turned hazard into homework and homework into heritage. The stubbornness that kept a small heat alive through a long night. The agreements no one wrote down and everyone understood. They will live where blood carries memory quieter than tongues do. Inside wrists, inside teeth, inside the ache you feel when you hear a baby cry in the dark and your feet move before your mind thinks. Someone far ahead of you will look at a thread inside themselves and say, "There was a narrowing once, a waist where the rope almost snapped." They'll be right. They'll also be wrong. Ropes that almost snap can also be knots, and knots hold. You will not meet them. You will give them their chance. At the last fire of this telling, you tuck the coals to sleep in their bowl, a low red breath under ash. The children lean into the ash with sticks and draw the same spiral the girl painted on her arm years ago. Their fingers come up gray and triumphant. Someone tears a flat cake along the blister seam and hands you the best piece because it's your turn. The night tilts its ear. A far jackal barks at nothing or at everything. A frog tries a new song and decides to keep it. The wind does arithmetic in the reeds. You feel the map under your ribs hum the note that has brought you this far. You close your eyes and see the first valley again. Not exactly its grass, not exactly its light, but the shape of relief that moved through your people when water climbed their skin. You see the first ember in the split log breathing patiently, and you see every ember since, cousins to each other across distances that words don't enjoy. You see hands, so many hands, lifting, passing, feeding, weaving, pointing, mending, counting one and another and another. When you sleep, you do not fall. You drift on the rope you helped strengthen, on the net your habits tied between storms, across the narrow place that did not break because 1,000 small choices said no in chorus. Morning will come with its work and its small mercies, and someone younger than you will rise first and stir the ash with a stick and grin when the red shows itself, alive again, ordinary miracle. They will feed it dry grass. They will lean close and blow, and the fire will open its eye as if woken from a good dream. You will watch that and feel the future touch your shoulder, light as ash. You will hand it your piece, and the world, which is always waiting to see what you will do next, will take a breath with you. You wake before light because the air has a taste you've learned to respect, cool and iron soft, the flavor of change. The young ones sleep on their sides with hands tucked under cheeks. Their breaths answer one another like a call and response. You ease past them, stir ash with a stick, and the coal you hid last night opens its eye, patient as always. You feed it dry grass, and it grows confident enough to wake the pot, to take the edge off water's bite, to make the day feel possible. Paths multiply the way roots do when the plant is pleased. At a bend where the river slows to listen to itself, you stack stones into a crescent that tells the current to hand you fish. Up on the ridge, you find a seam of black stone that asks to become points, and you answer it until your palms sing. You mark the spot with an antler jammed between two rocks, not to claim, only to point, and you discover that marking is a language the land understands. Elsewhere a branch is bent, a cairn is built, a smear of red earth is dragged across a pale rock in a spiral that means water. 2 mornings walk east. You're not drawing pictures. You're leaving kindness, and kindness learns to look like symbols. With time enough and food enough, your circle begins experimenting with what could be kept. You set seeds in soft silt after the river falls back, and the ground remembers. It's not ownership, more like rehearsal, a way to invite food to grow where your fire already likes to sit. You learn the timing. Press when the banks are still damp. Hum while you do it, not because the hum matters to seeds, but because it matters to hands. You make a fence of thorn to annoy the boar who refused to share, and the fence works because annoyance is a gentle power that doesn't complicate your sleep. Visitors return with news that feels like family. Far north, night comes sooner. Far west, the wind keeps a salt on its breath that makes meat last. Far south, a tree bleeds sweetness when cut. Your gifts travel without you. Coil of rope, trick with coals, the song that makes grinding less like punishment. One day, someone you've never seen arrives wearing a bead fired hard from clay the color of your valley's dusk. You touch it and recognize your own hands in its shine, even though they never touched this bead. That is how you learn distance can be intimate. A girl who once counted stars now counts risks. She watches the young men practice with the throwing sling and corrects their wrists with the same calm she uses to soothe a baby. She ties a scarlet thread through a boy's braid before a hunt because bright things like to be noticed, and she wants to watch him return across the grass. He does. He keeps the thread until it fades, then brings it back for another boy. Threads outlast reasons. There are ceremonies now, though you would never call them that because that word hasn't found you yet. When someone is new, born, or come from away, you draw ash across their brow and press your thumbprints on their shoulder. When someone is old enough to carry ember alone, they walk the path between the 2 hearths while the rest of you breathe in time and do not speak. When someone leaves for longer than a moon, you sing a low note and push smoke through your fingers as if to dress them in it. When they return, you sing it backward and laugh because it worked. The point is not belief. The point is attention that repeats until it becomes reliable. You keep getting better at not losing people. That isn't immortality. It's competence raised like a child. You know which cough loosens with steam and which wants bitter leaves, which cut needs cobweb and which needs heat. You can tell by a person's eyes whether they should carry or be carried today. When grief comes, you have a place for it now. A hillside with a kind view and a rock that warms fast in morning sun. You sit there in a silence that is not emptiness, and you remember out loud the joke that broke a hard day, the trick with the net, the way they made embers behave. Afterwards, you end the silence with a task. Lift a stone, mend a mat, because hands are where sorrow goes to turn back into love. You wake one night to a dream so clean it could be daylight. You're standing in a valley you don't recognize, but your body knows the script. Water moves. Grass kneels. A small hand reaches for a coal. The dream has no faces and all the faces. You turn to share it with the elder, to say, "I think I have met tomorrow," and realize with a gentle startle that you are the elder anyone would wake for that kind of story. The realization sits in your ribs warm as soup. You fall back asleep smiling and do not question why. In the seasons that follow, distance shrinks. Not because your legs are longer, but because the world is webbed now. Ash-marked stones, gifts, songs, shared habits, paths that have learned your weight. You spend a wet month in a bowl where frogs sing like hail on skin drums, and a dry month on a ridge that keeps its own wind. In both places you sleep without counting threats. Your people are still few in a way numbers would respect, but you are many in the ways that matter, ways that move, that speak, that survive. A child is born with a birthmark shaped like a coal on her shoulder. Someone laughs, someone weeps, someone presses a thumb to it and says, "Of course." No one argues. The world loves a rhyme. Eventually, a question arrives with a patience you recognize. It doesn't speak in words. It rises from the fire when it's low, and from the river when it's tired, and from your bones when they're busy. What did those 1,000 people do that mattered most? You look around the circle, at bread blistering, at a splint bound neatly with fiber, at a stranger's child asleep with your dog's nose under their palm, and you understand the answer isn't a single invention or a single feat, it's a posture. It's the way you tilt yourself toward each other. It's the way heat and story and work pass hand to hand, as if there is nothing else worth doing. And because that answer repeats, because it has been rehearsed so long it needs no audience, the future arrives with somewhere to sit. Dawn comes with a moon still hanging on like a reminder. You tip the coal bowl and watch the red breathe back to orange, then to the yellow that means tell the pot its day has begun. As steam lifts, you feel the pull again, the quiet rope that tugs from somewhere you haven't stood yet. It's not restlessness. It's the old lesson repeating. Water wants to meet more water. People want to meet more people. The land leans you toward a different kind of edge. The air thins of dust and fattens with a taste you cannot name until the wind opens its mouth and gives you salt. You've never swallowed this flavor. Your tongue still knows it. The world widens into a brightness that does not end and moves whether you ask it to or not. A body of water larger than any story you've told stands in front of you and breathes in long, patient tides. You step into your ankles, and the earth steps back without apology. The child with the coal birthmark yelps at the cold and then laughs because the wave laughs too, running away only to return braver. You learn a new grammar. The moon pulls the water as if it were bead and string. Flat fish hide like secrets. Birds write a black handwriting against sky and dive and come up gilded with their own luck. Mussels glue themselves to rocks and dare you to be patient. You pry them when the tide is a thought and steam them when the tide is a memory. You tie stones to a net's bottom so it learns to sink. You twist cord from tough grass the river never met. You discover that smoke never tires of making friends with meat. Nights by the big water teach a different quiet. The horizon is a ruler the sky lays down. Stars gather in old positions. You notice new ones because the air here is a dome that keeps little. You lie on your back and point until your shoulder aches. This one rises when the tide turns. This one falls when the wind plans mischief. That smear of milk light reminds you that distance is made of many small nearnesses. The girl, no longer a girl, marks a cold spark with her finger and says, softly, "Go toward that when the birds skim low and the water smells like rain." She is not naming navigation. She is naming trust. Visitors at the shore arrive in a way you didn't know people could arrive. They come together on something that floats because they told it to, logs lashed with vine, a skin stretched tight across a frame, a raft built from the idea that would wants to help. The craft noses the shallows, and the people step down laughing the laugh of those who argued with water and were not humiliated. They smell like far. Their hair is tied with shells you've never seen. Their hands remember rope. Their voices carry a rhythm trained by waves. You feed them and they feed you, and then you pass between you the real food. How to keep ember brave in wind, how to read a squall, how to hold a line against a current that thinks it is the only idea. You do not suddenly become sailors. You become listeners of a wider mouth. At first you stay inside the shore's shadow, keeping a hand on the land with your eyes. You count strokes against breath and invent a chant that makes the work move through you instead of against you. When you're ready, when your fear has sharpened into respect, you cross a bite of open water between two arms of land and return with a joy that feels like new bone in your chest. You do not conquer anything. You visit. You remember. You leave a cairn. You learn where not to try again. The web tightens over the large water the way it tightened over river bowls and stone seams. Gifts change shape, but not meaning. A woman shows you how to set a fish with a spine like a saw across a rack, so its oil falls into a shell and becomes a lamp. You show her how to dry ember in a pinch of clay, so even a soaking cannot shame you. A man who was a child 3 valleys ago brings you a bag of white crystals that lick like winter. Someone sings a song you didn't know you knew, and you join on the second refrain because songs are maps too. Back inland, because you never stop being inland people even when you taste salt. You notice that sickness is rarer, not gone, less greedy. You notice that bellies stay round through a dry that would have bitten you hard in the first valley. You notice that when an accident steals someone, the hole they leave is still a hole, but not a break. The net holds because it is finally net and not just a wish. You know that numbers matter, and you know that numbers are not everything. A single stubborn habit can outshout a crowd of mistakes. A single shared trick can make a season choose mercy. Years flicker. You are the voice others consult when the river lies and when it tells the truth too loudly. Hands learn your scars by tracing them when they need a moment. Your stories have been sanded by retelling until they fit anywhere. You teach without ceremony. A wrist turned here, a knot dressed there, a look toward a sky that starts to think about changing. You catch yourself repeating words you once heard from mouths gone into the kind shade, and the echo lifts the hairs on your arms because you understand lineage in your bones. Not as names on a rope, but as pressure, direction, a steady tug that kept the rope from empty air. One evening, while the flatbread blisters in its old, perfect way and smoke takes the wet from fish, someone asks you whether the narrowing was a story or a number. You answer by passing them a coal with tongs and saying, "Don't drop it." They don't. They pass it to the next, who passes it to the next, and the circle proceeds in slow, careful comedy, laughter riding caution, heat riding skin, until the coal is home again in its bowl, undropped. That, you say? That's what happened. For a very long time. They look at their fingers, unburned, and nod like they have met history personally and found it intimate. The coast becomes a season you visit, then a cousin you cannot ignore, then a promise you allow yourself. That if open water ever calls louder than land, the knowledge you need will already be inside the work you do. For now, you bend back into the interior's grammar, bowls, reeds, rains, and let salt live on your tongue as a reminder that the world is larger than your fear and kinder than your plans. You begin giving away more than you keep. It's not selflessness, it's architecture. A drill here, a napping trick there, the habit of bending a branch over a path to say turn without stopping. You mend a stranger's net and send them off with a coil of your rope and a story they can tell as if it were theirs. In return, you keep something you didn't know you were missing. The look on their face when they realize they will not drown today. The sound of their voice when they come back because they said they would. When the dry leans harder than anyone remembers, your circle leans back. You are not spared the work. You are spared the panic. You lift caches from old trees that hid baskets of grain like secrets. You call in favors not as debts, but as rehearsed kindness. You move before thirst does. You arrive where green has decided to lodge. You survive without becoming smaller. That is new. There is a night, no different from other nights. The way milestones always pretend to be ordinary, when a child announces, with a solemnity that belongs on much older mouths, that they will carry the ember to the second hearth. Everyone chuckles because everyone knows they've done it in their sleep for months. Still, the circle watches as the child stands, receives the coal in its clay pinch, breathes the way you taught them, long, low, as if singing to a shy animal, and walks the path between fires while the world holds still to see if this is the night the rope fails. It isn't. The coal sets down into its bed with the polite sigh of something that knew it would make it. The child looks up and finds their face reflected in every other face, pride moving like light from cheek to cheek. You feel a tired so sweet it nearly hurts. Later, when the big water is a rumor behind you and the small river is an argument beside you and the sky is clear enough to betray even the smallest star, you sit with your back to a warm rock and count. Not people, not stores, not miles. You count continuances. The times hunger was fed by habit. The times fear was shortened by forethought. The times grief was held until it could walk on its own. You count until counting becomes breathing and breathing becomes sleep. If anyone ever asks, far ahead, how the future was rescued by so few, there will be 1,000 scholarly answers and one true one. It is this: a coal passed without dropping, a path walked without hoarding, a rule kept without writing, a circle widened until it could hold weather. You did not win. You endured correctly. And because you did, Someone you will never meet will stand at some new edge of water, of winter, of wonder, and feel a tug inside their ribs that they will trust. They will call it instinct or luck or grace. It will be you.